on this episode of the Dubcast, part of the Roundball Australia podcast network. We're going to discuss how we would improve the A-League women beyond the simple answer of more money, which sadly is at the crux of a lot of issues. It's easy enough to just say things aren't good enough or that more money is needed, but how do you tangibly quantify that into achievable goals? We've seen what happens when you just splash money around for the sake of it. So we're going to try and discuss actual solutions that could bring about positive change for the A-League women. My name is Poletti, and joining me as always is Burke. We're going to get into our main topic today, and that is how we're going to improve the A-League women. Burke, why don't you kick us off?
So, how to improve the A-League women is a big task, and considering the absolute blasting the league got given by Tom Sermanni just a couple of weeks ago.
Which is what inspired this discussion, I might add. We sort of...
everyone starts to take it seriously. You've literally got like the godfather of the A-League women's being like, hey, this kind of sucks, guys. So we should probably listen. Anyway, there's a lot of things that could be done to, elevate the A-League women's. There's a lot of things that should be done that are kind of just like absolute no-brainers, but aren't done for, I don't know what reason. I'm not in charge. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. A-Leagues, put me in charge. Let me fix this. But one of the main things, again, blatantly obvious, full-time contracts, longer contracts for players, for staff, for head coaches. And if you're not too familiar with the A-League women's, you're probably sitting there like, what do you mean full-time? The contracts that are offered in the A-League's women's only run for 35 weeks at the longest, which, if you're aware, a year has 52 weeks. 35 weeks is a lot less than 52. And that is that is a huge reason why many players will spend their off seasons playing in their local NPLs or moving around to different NPLs, because they need to play and they need to be able to train with, decent or even at just plainly adequate facilities, and the NPL can provide. As for coaching and staff, they also would, I assume, run on the same contracting. And we know that coaches clearly don't make enough money, because you have coaches like Ante Juric for Sydney FC, who runs his coaching gig alongside other coaching gigs. Full-time contract, a 52-week contract. Hell, even 40 weeks would probably make a huge difference. And I know the PFA is pushing for this, but they're pushing for it every year. And I feel like they've been pushing for it since I first started getting interested in this, and that was about 10 years ago now. So if we could really kind of roll that one on, that'd be good. You'd probably stop losing so many good young players, international players as well. They also, you hear about it all the time. Players come, they speak about how much they love playing here, they love their club, they love their teammates, they love, the environment that they get to live in Australia, and then they immediately leave. And you're like, what? Why did they do that? Why did they gaslight me and say they loved it here so much, only to up and leave the next day? It's because they need to live. And they simply do not make enough money to live here. Australia has a pretty high cost of living, so
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so as you touched on, it's 35-week contracts. There are some coaches who are paid 52 weeks a year full time. The Wellington Phoenix, David Domi was speaking. He's the general manager. He was speaking in an interview with Fever FM last month. But the Phoenix have actually gone one step further. It's not just the coach that's full time. It's assistant coach Amy Shepherd, who's full time. It's all of the support staff who are also full time. What they do for the men's program, they do for the women's program. To my knowledge, they are the only club that has a full time assistant coach and full time support staff. That is, like, for a side that has been in the women's competition for less than half a decade. That's an indictment on the rest of the league, that this is what they're doing in 4 years. What are you doing, everyone else? Like, the Mariners literally ran on a shoestring budget and they won the championship, which also might be an indictment on the Wellington Phoenix, with Domi in that same interview basically saying, yeah, they got their international recruitment completely wrong, and that was part of the reason. But, you know, you've got clubs running on shoestring budgets while you've got one club out here who's being like, yes, we're losing money, but it's not fair to be inequitable to one team within the organization compared to the other team within the organization. And that's not to say that A-League men's clubs aren't running on shoestring budgets. As Ruben Zadkovich pointed out, his video analyst is also a manager at a pizza shop. As someone who's been a manager at a pizza shop, I can tell you it is hard work. So trying to be a video analyst for an A-League side on top of that, I can't imagine what that would be like. But yes, I think getting those full-time contracts for players, for coaching staff, and then the longer contracts is an interesting point there as well, Burke. We know that the transfer market in women's football is growing rapidly. Imagine what you could be doing in the transfer market if you had players locked up for 2 years, 3 years, 4-year contracts. I mean, Adelaide United men handing out 5-year contracts at one point like they were candy, right? So, like, get players on 3-year contracts and you will sell these players. Like, I remember it used to be, this was before the full home and away season where the season got extended, when players were on, like, you know, there was 12, 16 games, and clubs were just like, well, why would we bother? They're going to be out of contract in 3 weeks anyway. We'll just wait to sign them as a free agent. And we've sort of started to see Melbourne City have been a big beneficiary of this, where it's like, well, okay, we want to get these players signed up now, so we're going to pay a transfer fee to get them out of their contracts early. In terms of, you know, NWSL clubs, WSL clubs doing their mid-season recruitment, you know, that sort of thing. You get players on 2 or 3 year contracts. Like, there's a lot of talent here. Can you imagine right now if Izzy Gomez was in the middle of a 3-year contract? I think she's probably staying this season, but, you know, if she's in,
would buy.
Like, if she is in year
Not
2
even
of a
would, should.
Yes, like, if she's in year 2 of a 3-year deal in January, and there's a side that comes knocking, well, you've got her under contract for another year and a half, pay up, or we're keeping her. You know, that's $100,000, $150,000 player right there. You know, given that the A-League women's salary cap is what, 600,000 at last check? Like, that's a quarter of your salary cap right there in one player. It's insane. So that's probably one of the biggest points we can come up with, Burke.
Oh, absolutely. The people want to say that there's no money in women's football, but there's no money in women's football because you don't make the opportunity for there to be money in women's football. Oh, you can't sell your players. Offer them a larger contract so you can. Like I said before, this isn't rocket science. This isn't brain surgery. This isn't, I don't know, some other incredibly complex job that I couldn't do. Like, it's not that. It's actually very simple. Like, it's so simple that I know the answers. Someone's dog would know the answers. In fact, I'm pretty sure my friends' dogs would know the answers. Your cats probably know the answers.
I mean,
hope they do.
I've got Alex Kidiak staring at me right. I've got Alex Kidiak staring at me right now like she knows the answer.
If you think Alex Kidiak doesn't know the answers, I have a bridge to sell you. Um, I feel like I have these conversations about improving the A-Leagues so frequently in real life just because my friends don't know anything about it, so I just talk to them and it's like talking to a brick wall and they're like, yeah, uh-huh. And I'm like, and the salary cap and the contracts and the international players, and they're like, uh-huh. It gets to a point that I feel like I can't keep saying it. I can't keep saying the same things over and over again. But here I am, saying it over again. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, you want to make money, you have to spend money. I feel like that's like the first lesson they tell you. They teach you in those like fake classes about economics or whatever. I don't believe in economics, but I'm sure some people do. So, yeah, if you put money into it, you will get money out of it. You have seen the explosion in support in the women's game in the US, in the UK. Other countries are coming up big as well, like Sweden, like Germany. Like, what? Why can't that be us? Why shouldn't it be us? Let it be us. Please, I'm tired. I'm tired of this, Grandpa. You keep talking.
Well, we will keep talking because we've got a lot more to get to. Our second point, stop using training grounds to play actual meaningful league games. And right here, I am specifically talking about Melbourne City and the Western Sydney Wanderers. Am I happy that clubs have their own facilities? Absolutely, of course. We need more clubs to have their own facilities. But they should not be hosting A-League women games. These are training grounds at Wanderers Football Park and Casey Fields. So I've already forgotten what the sponsor name is. That's how bad it was.
I only ever refer to it as like the joking name that we've given it on Beyond 90, and I can't remember the real one.
But yeah, so you know, like the semi-final was held at Casey Fields that can't host an adequate amount of broadcast cameras because there's nowhere to put the extra scaffolding to host the extra cameras. There's nowhere for, and it's the same at Wanderers Football Park. You've the setup there is completely detrimental to trying to draw a crowd, especially in summer. So for those who don't know, the way a broadcast works is the camera operators have to, or like the broadcast operators have to set the cameras up where the sun is essentially to the back of the operators so that you don't get the glare on the screen as you're trying to watch a game. If you've ever watched Rockdale Illington game in the NPL New South Wales men's around 4 o'clock in the afternoon in winter, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about because the sun glares on the pitch and you miss quite a significant portion of the action. So at Wanderers Football Park, you've got the cameras on one side and they reflect onto the seats which are there, which is fine. But the problem is that it's like metal, like school park seating in the middle of summer. I don't know if you understand how metal works, but heat and metal, not good viewing experience. So you end up with a situation where people don't want to go to the venue to watch games because it's in incredibly uncomfortable conditions. And it also can't host an adequate amount of cameras to run a better quality broadcast. And that's going to be another point we'll get onto in a moment. But you can't, I don't want training grounds to be used to broadcast fixtures. Like, I look at Wanderers Football Park and, like, NPL is probably its limit because the NPL uses a single camera setup. And to be fair, that's probably the most appropriate amount of cameras to use at a venue like Wanderers Football Park. And probably the same at Casey Fields. So let's get actual venues. And I'm not suggesting that we go into 20,000, 30,000 seat stadiums that are incredibly expensive to run, will lose clubs money because clubs are already losing enough money. But like, is there no reason that the Western Sydney Wanderers can't host more games at Marconi Stadium or at another NPL venue in the area that has decent grandstand and those sorts of things? I'm not too sure what the setup is like in Melbourne, Burke, but surely there'd be NPL clubs that could host Melbourne City. And I'm not saying play at home with the Matildas because Melbourne Victory have clearly solidified that as their home ground. But like, surely there'd have to be another NPL club with a decent facility that could host Melbourne City games.
I'm trying to think of all the places that I've gone to for the NPL. Heidelberg is, I'd say, is probably one of the better ones, but I don't know about cameras there. You'd have to be putting up scaffolding somewhere.
Well, I mean, it's hosted Australia Cup fixtures before at the national stages.
Yes, actually.
Like, you could use Knight Stadium, Lakeside Stadium.
Lakeside actually is a great shout. Lakeside.
There are some venues there in which you could use.
They've used Lakeside before, Melbourne City. Maybe it was Victory. I don't know. I've been to Lakeside before for A-League games, for Dub games. Yeah, go Lakeside. That's fun. It's a nice venue. There's good parking. I used to do my high school athletics there. It's really funny for me to go there and be like, well, it was really funny at the time that I did go there because it was like, why is Emily Van Egmond running around where we were doing discus? Why is that happening? But yeah, Lakeside's a great shout. I immediately jumped to Heidelberg United because I'm there very frequently. Who else? Bentley? I don't know about Bentley either. There's a couple on like the west side. Is it City Vista? Is that the one that Western United played at a few times?
I think that sounds about right. It'd be the home of Caroline Springs, George Cross, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, that's the one.
I think that's probably too far west, given that I know Melbourne City are trying to set a presence up in the east of Melbourne, which is why Lakeside Stadium came to mind for me, because it's,
if they're desperate. I mean, it's a good enough facility, as I feel, because it's quite new as well. Yeah, I reckon Lakeside and Heidelberg if they were desperate, but that's more north of Victoria. Not that Lakeside is very southeast. It's more southeast, but yeah.
Yeah. I think if we can get rid of training grounds as venues to host A-League women games, that's probably going to be a lot better in the long term. I know Melbourne City are trying to do things out at Casey Fields, but between COVID and government funding and everything like that, it is taking time. But to even if we had VAR for the A-League Women finals, how are you supposed to set that up at Casey Fields? The reality is that you can't.
You are not.
No,
you're
not.
Are not doing that.
Exactly, which I think leads perfectly into our next point, Burke. Better broadcast.
I would love a better broadcast. Just, again, it's like the simplest things. Like, can we have a little pregame show, please? Can we have a commentator that's at the venue, which is no shade to the commentators at all. They do incredible stuff with what they've got. I love all of the commentators that we have for the A-League Women's. They're all fantastic. But if they could be there, that would be really good. So then we could avoid these situations where something's happened that the commentator doesn't know about because they can't see it, because they only get what they're shown.
Exactly. So, I mean, going back to Brisbane Roar versus Western United earlier this year at Perry Park,
exactly what I was thinking of.
You've got Taryn Hetto calling the game winner for Western United, and then it looks like plays resumed from the kickoff, but actually it resumed from an offside. And in the meantime, she's in the studio in Sydney getting fed replays of the goal with no one in the production truck actually realizing that it's offside. Because they're focused on showing replays. And so you've got Taron Heddo calling a winner. The scoreboard is reflecting the change because it's simply someone in Sydney. And in the meantime, you've got the game ending like 2 minutes later. Taron Heddo's calling the winner. And in the meantime, like, because I was there at that game because I was in Brisbane that weekend, and I'm seeing people panicked, being like their phones blowing up, being like, no, broadcast is wrong. What's going on? Sort of vibe. So yeah, it was very much a, like that situation could easily be avoided by having a commentator on site.
Yeah, and I think it's really unfair of the league to do this to the commentators because they're doing everything they can with what they have, but they don't have enough to actually do their job adequately, and they want to. I've seen the preparation notes that they make and the work that they do, these commentators. It's crazy. Can you imagine how much better it'd be for them as, a a worker, as a member of staff, and for the actual product if they were given more? Or if they were, given the, I feel like it's the bare minimum almost to be allowed to commentate from the actual ground. Yeah, it's, yeah, no good. No good. Send, if you're gonna send someone to Sydney, just send them to Brisbane. Like, wh- what are we doing? What are we
No,
doing?
I know. Like, I mean, I know, like, there's commentators who have flown from Melbourne to Sydney to call a game in Melbourne, and it's like,
What are we
just
doing?
can you not set them up at the ground? Like, and
What are
I
we
will
doing?
give the APL a touch of credit here. I know that they have been sending commentators to the ground a little bit more this season in the A-League Women competition, but and I think this sort of loops back into point one, is that there are just some grounds where you can't do it. You can't send commentators on site to number 2 sports ground because there's nowhere to put them. I know Robbie Thompson went to Ironbark Fields for Western United's elimination final in the A-League men competition, and he had difficulty calling at the ground because where the position is that they were set up, it literally had half the view of the pitch blocked by the fans in front of them. So I understand there are some venues where it is a necessity to not have someone on site because it actually makes the experience worse or is just feasibly impossible. But at that point, can you not have a sideline commentator at the ground who can then loop this information back? Like, I know there's been, like, using number 2 sports ground as an example, I know that there's been times where goals have been called because you can't see the flag go up on the wide angle lens to indicate offside, and you get that 45 second replays, goal call, how the play broke down, and then it's like, oh, actually, plays resumed from an offside. That's easily fixed by having, a sideline commentator who can just like, hey, actually, it's offside, abort, sort of, vibe or whatever it is. Like, you can find these sorts of things to make it work a lot better. I will say, I think for me, if you look at it, you get the idea of the A-League men and the A-League women have different minimum broadcast standards. I think if it's not good enough for the A-League men, it should not be considered good enough for the A-League women, and that should be the standard that the A-League women is held to. Like, if you wouldn't have this for an A-League men game, it should not be considered acceptable for an A-League women game. I'm not suggesting in any way that the platform or distribution has to change in the slightest. I think Paramount Plus is a fine product. I think that 10 Play is a fine product for broadcast. I have no issue with how they're going about the distribution methods, but I think just the standard of broadcast needs to change, Burke.
Yeah, and you absolutely read my mind with the sideline commentator because that was the next thing I was going to suggest. It was like, I was going to interrupt you, but then you started saying it, and I was like, never mind. Never mind. Same wavelength. Yeah, I think a sideline commentator would be so fun. Let me do it. Let me do it. I would love to stand on the sidelines at Amy Park and be like, actually, that was offside, guys. It was offside. Not that you can't see everything at Amy Park, but still. Um, yeah, a sideline commentator would be really fun. Really fun. And honestly, if they're gonna keep doing the we're commentating from the studio, but we're pretending we're at the ground thing, kind of necessary. Because we can't keep doing this. It looks low quality. It's embarrassing a little. And I don't know what the deal is if they're making the commentators pretend that they're at the ground, but it's not good. I don't like it. Please stop. Please lower the gun from their heads and stop making them pretend. Please. Yeah, no
Yes.
good. But yeah, I definitely agree. I think Paramount is great for it. The only thing that I would like from Paramount is to stop asking me to press play like 4 separate times before it actually shows me the game. Like if I hit play, I want I want to watch. Stop stop making me press play 300 times to play from like where it's starting. Please. But that's a personal
Yes.
issue. Like I don't know if everyone has that, but I have that and it drives me up the wall every single time. They're like, "Oh, do
Yes.
you want to start from the beginning or do you want to go right to where it's happening?" Right where it's happening. Do you want to go from the start or do you want to go for right where it's right? Please. Live.
I will
Unbearable.
say, that is something that I enjoy personally, because like I know there's times where I've come into a game and I've missed like the first 5 minutes, and so I want to be able to go back to the start and then just skip ahead at half time. So
Understandable.
I understand the function of it, but yes, I
It
think what
just
annoys me the most is when I'm watching a game from kickoff and it'll get to like the 80th minute and it's like, are you still watching? It's like, yes, clearly I'm still watching. Like, don't ask me to
don't
don't
ask
ask
me
me this.
stupid questions. You are not in charge here. I am in charge here. Do what I say.
Yes. Uh,
Unbearable.
so far we've gone through full time contracts and longer contracts for players and staff. Stop using training grounds. Better quality broadcasts. Burke, what is our next point?
The next point that is, I think, a really, well, quite a big one, is something that we've spoken about like 100 million trillion times on this podcast, on the other podcast I'm on all the other podcasts. Please, for the love of God, fix the kickoff times. Please stop kicking off games at 2 p.m. on a Saturday in the middle of January. Please stop. Again, this is something that the PFA have written and spoken about a lot. Um, don't know if you guys know this, but climate change is real. And it is, if for some reason you're an international listener, it is unbearably hot in this country during the summer. It's also unbearably cold during the winter, which is current. I hate it here so much. Um, but yeah, the heat, horrible. Stop making the players play in situations where there are two water breaks. That is insane. Even having one water break, honestly, tells you that it is too hot to play, sort of. If I had to run around for 45 minutes without water, I'd be really annoyed. So I think one drink break is kind of fair, but I'd be campaigning for a drinks break in every single game if I was a player, which is why I'm not a player. I also don't know how to play football, so that's also why I'm not a player. But yeah, stop with these stupid kickoffs that are honestly putting the players' health at risk and the fans. Like, no one should be sitting outside at 2 p.m. when it's like 38 degrees. Well, 38 degrees is actually over the allowed. But like when it's like 34 and they're like, oh, it hasn't hit the wet bulb. No one should be outside. No one should be outside. Stop.
Exactly. Like, I mean,
Stop.
using McKellar Park as an example, like you've got games kicking off at 4 p.m. It's 34 degrees, and the reason given is that it doesn't have adequate enough lights for broadcast. Well, just maybe, don't play home games in the middle of summer in Canberra. And I understand school holidays, you want to try and draw a crowd, but like, if it's not safe to play, it's not safe to play. There's no reason for these games to be kicking off at 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in 34 degree heat. Like, you've got to fix this up. Like, it's ridiculous. And I think we can kind of move this into one of our other points, Burke, as well, which is scrapping double headers, because more often than not, it's the women's teams that are at the disadvantage of having to play in the heat, either like before. Like, I remember there being a Melbourne City game where it was a 5 p.m. kickoff in the A-League men, and the women were scheduled to kick off at 2:15 p.m. when it was going to be like 40 degrees outside, and it's like, yeah, this is too hot to play. Let's move this to afterwards, and it was still too hot to play, and yet they played with 2 drinks breaks. It's like a 7:30 p.m. kickoff on a Sunday night. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
When I think about this issue being like the time slots and the heat and that kind of thing, the thing that really jumped out at me, especially this season, was the like one and only time that the inverse happened and the Adelaide United men had the early slot and it was really, really hot, and all of a sudden everyone was like, "Oh my God, the quality of this game is so bad. I can't believe they're playing in this kind of conditions. What are we doing?" And everyone was so mad, and I saw think pieces about it on like was it the ABC? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Don't
I know.
don't
I will say, our very own Jacob Stevens for Round Ball Australia did write a piece about the heat in that particular game. So there was one. There's one I know was written.
like, oh, we care about the heat now, do we? Do we? Oh, it affects the quality of the game when you kick off at 2 p.m. and it's 100,000 degrees, does it? Huh. That's crazy. I had no idea. The way that the women's game in Australia, and this counts for like other women's sports too, particularly the AFLW, which obviously isn't our game, but relevant in this sense. The way that these leagues are put in the most abominable circumstances and then still expected to succeed is unbelievable. You put these games on at ridiculous times in ridiculous places. Casey Fields. Casey Fields, when I get my hands on you, that's a joke. That's a joke. Mostly. And then then you still have any sort of expectation of success is just unfathomable to me. Oh, they don't get any crowds. You've slated kickoff for 5 p.m. on a Friday. What crowd? Who's going? I don't care if it's the school holidays. The children don't have money to buy tickets. Do you know who has money to buy tickets? Parents. And where are the parents? Oh, they're on the commute home from work, are they? Oh. Again, this is all stuff that is just like absolute no-brainers. Like, again, someone's dog is out there like they're barking to themselves, but really they're saying, "Why is the schedule like this? Why is the schedule like this?" Girl, we don't know. We don't know.
It is just so frustrating, and I felt that sigh with every fiber of my being, Burke. I get it. So better kickoff times and scrapping double headers. I will
Please.
say, I will say, just I am okay with select double headers, and when I say select double headers, I mean if you've got something like you're doing the Pride Cup, then I think having that as a double header is okay. But like it should be a special occasion, not because you have to meet some kind of just like agreement or something with a venue. I think just having like make it feel like it's a special occasion is probably the best way I can word that. And then I think the last point we really want to touch on, and we're going to combine two of the points we got here as well, is focusing on the draw to avoid clashes and more and better promotion for games. So quite often we see games clash where you'll see the Western Sydney Wanderers and Sydney FC kick games off at the exact same time in the A-League Women, which then prevents fans and media from attending both games, which hurts your coverage of the league. It hurts your visibility of the league. I think the same has happened in Melbourne on a couple of occasions as well. Like, it should not be this hard to schedule games appropriately to avoid very avoidable clashes. But then it's also things like avoiding clashes with local sport, avoiding clashes with A-League men fixtures. Like, there's been Sydney FC and Western Sydney Wanderers double headers going on the same day in the same city where, you can't get to things. Like, I don't think that's happened in Melbourne. I could be wrong, but like what I know from a lot of the people I talk to is there are a lot of people who are just A-Leagues fans, and they want to go to as many A-Leagues games as possible, both men's and women's. And I'm not saying that the number swing is going to be massive, but I also think you can get it to a point where, how many people are you preventing from coming? Is it 50? Is it 100? Is it 150? Is it 200? And then, how much are tickets? Is that $10, $15, $20? Like, that's not an insignificant amount of money if it's happening 2 or 3 times a season for clubs that are losing money left, right, and center. And then the A-League Women Grand Final in 2 of the last 3 years has been played on a Sunday when women's local football is being played. They predominantly play on Sundays, and so you then can't get players who have their own NPL games to play. You've got fans who have their own NPL games to play. You've got young kids who can't go to the spectacle showcase of our game because they've got to play their local league games, or their parents can't take them because they're playing their own league games, right? Like, this is actively hurting the crowd number. And I'm like, this year the grand final, it was 6,000 and something people. Could that number have gotten to 7,000 if you play that on Saturday? Could it have gotten to 8,000? I think it was 10,000 turned up for Sydney FC and Western United, or it was 9,000 and something. And that was the first year of the failed APL Grand Final deal at Parramatta. But could that not have been 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 if you didn't play it on a Sunday afternoon? These things matter, and then more promotion and better promotion, right? So I know Melbourne Victory had a presence at the Matildas game that was in Melbourne recently, but they didn't tell anyone until half an hour after the players had already shown up at the ground. I didn't see anything in Canberra. I also wasn't necessarily on the lookout for it. But I also know with the players not under contract at the moment, it's hard to organize these sorts of things. But there's got to be ways to better promote the schedule, as well as just making sure the schedule is just better, period. But
Yeah, one thing I want to say about the clashing, especially with other like men's league games, you can't push the idea of one club when you're forcing everyone to choose one side. There are lots of clubs, I don't necessarily agree with the whole one club thing. I get it, but I also no no club has really shown me that they actually believe that they're one club, because if they did, we wouldn't be making this podcast, would we? Not this specific episode, would we? But yeah, you can't be like, oh, one club, but then make your fans choose to go to the men's or the women's game. Honestly, maybe this is a hugely broadly generalized statement. It probably is. I'm going to make it anyway. Don't care. Because of the patriarchal society that we live in, 9.9 times out of 10, who do you think they're going to pick to go and watch? Because whose game is at the better kickoff time? Because whose game is at the more accessible ground? Where do you think they're going? The men's game. Every time. Every time. 9.99 times out of 10. So, miss me with the one club garbage. Fix your time slots so fans that want to support your entire club can. Because there are people that do that. There are quite a few. I know Sydney FC have a really great bunch of fans that go between both men's and women's games. And I'm sure they'd like to do more of it, but they physically can't because the league makes them choose. Stop it. Stop it.
Yes.
Oof. And on the promotional front, just one thing there, this happened multiple times. I don't watch a lot of like actual television on a TV, but sometimes I do. And for quite some time, I think, when did the league finish? The league finished in May. Was it May? Yeah, so it might have been like March, April, watching TV here and seeing and getting whiplash trying to turn to the TV, being like, hang on, what's that? It's an ad for an A-League women's and A-League men's game for Melbourne City, like in March, April, but the game they were advertising had already happened and was in February. And now, I don't know, I've had a very rough week and a half, 2 weeks. Maybe I'm losing my mind a little bit, but I swear to God, I saw that ad multiple times. I'm not hallucinating, okay? I didn't make it up. I remember having a conversation with my mother about it, being like, wait, is the date on that for February? It was. It was. And it was
vaguely recall
March or April.
Yes. I vaguely recall seeing the same thing while I was watching a Sydney FC game on 10 Bold.
What are we doing?
Yeah, no, I vaguely recall seeing an old... It was either for the game that was going on, which I want to say was against Perth Glory, or it was for a game that had happened like a week or two prior. So yes, I have recalled seeing that this season at some point, yes.
Like, can we just keep on top of things, please? Can we just change the dates in the ad? Or just pull the ad. Just pull it. Just give it a little vaudeville cane, hook. Yoink.
Exit, stage
Get
left.
out of it. Exactly. Chased by bear. It's a really niche reference, I think, to a Shakespeare play, so if you missed that, that's fine. Yeah, just the ones I have enjoyed, because I actually saw them around near where I live, and I live in I say it's the southeast, but if you spoke to someone that lived in Dandenong or Noble Park, they'd try to start a fight with me, because it's much more inner, but it's not, it's vaguely southeast, right? Driving around sometimes, I'd see posters in bus stops and stuff, and they'd just have the next 4 or 5 weeks of the fixture, men's and women's. That's good stuff, because then you don't have to worry about that for a month and a half. You can just put that up and you can leave it there. It's not out of date because it's got all the dates on it. Let's work smarter, not harder.
That is exactly what I saw for what was it? That is what I saw for MacArthur FC. They did that very well this season. Is a lot of the bus stops around Campbelltown, which is where I live. just had like the list of home fixtures, like the entire season list of home fixtures, that was up for like 3 months at all these varying different bus stops, so that you can, you can just have that there, and you don't have to worry about changing it because people should be able to know what the date is and what the next fixture is. And I think also making sure that you get the target demographics right as well. This is going to be a very old one, but for anyone who remembers the Yoshi marketing campaign, you've got to have a team. This is going back a good pre-COVID, like 8 or 9 years. This is going to be like, it's very niche, but this was when the Western Sydney Wanderers were still using Campbelltown Stadium as a home ground for select games. And at the bus stop outside the ground, they had you've got to have a team with the Sydney FC player and colour scheme on it on the day of a Wanderers home game, I might add. Maybe just maybe just get those little things right if you're actually going to do promotion as well.
Again, super simple stuff, guys. We're not discovering the cure for my autoimmune disease. It's just, I picked my autoimmune disease because mine is relatively low scale. Although I would love a cure if someone wants to crack out the cure for celiac disease, that'd be great. But we're not inventing that.
Stop paying $10 for a loaf of gluten-free bread.
Please. And it's the size. It's this big. Please. But yeah, this isn't crazy stuff. This is all just kind of really low scale, bare minimum stuff. A-Leagues, if you want to hire me at your base rate of pay, just so I can hover over someone's shoulder and say, hey, don't put the advertising of a Sydney FC player up when it's a Western Sydney Wanderers game. I'm happy to do that.
And then this is not going to be a point per se, but this is more of a discussion topic, and it's one that has been thrown around quite a lot over the years, is the idea of international marquees. So we've seen the A-League men try this before. Dwight York, Cascade Honda, Shinji Ono, Del Piero, Perth Glory tried it with Daniel Sturridge during COVID. That worked for all of about 20 minutes, I think he took to the pitch for. But we have also seen this happen previously in the A-League women, and this is quite relatively recently, I should say, beyond just the normal Americans that have come in that have a higher NRI value, name recognition index value, because of the lining up of the W League and the NWSL seasons, the likes of Megan Rapinoe and stuff like that. You look at going back to the Fox Sports days where they had the War Chest, which was part of what brought Cascade Honda to the A-League, which was designed to help increase ratings. And one of the players that was the beneficiary of the War Chest was Sam Kerr, who received a massive payday for the 2018-19 season, and she became the W League's first ever marquee signing for the Perth Glory, and received a salary of $400,000 for her troubles, which, if you've been doing the math, is about 2/3 of the current A-League women's salary cap. And I think, we know that crowds are sometimes lacking in the A-League women for all of the points that we've touched on in the last 50 minutes or so. This idea of marquee players, Burke, I think if you look at Sydney FC's attendances, they took a spike after the Women's World Cup because they had Courtney Vine. And I haven't quite done the math, but I'd be willing to bet there's been an attendance drop-off at Sydney FC games if you average it out over the course of the season, the last season, because Courtney Vine isn't there.
To be fair, we can't just blame that on Courtney Vine leaving. We can also put a lot of that on Sydney FC being not good.
Yes, no, no, and I
Props
said
to the props to the devoted fans that did keep turning up, though.
no, and I said I
Good for
understand
you
that
guys.
as a valid point, but you know, it's also
Sorry, I do have to mention anytime I can that
I'd be
Sydney
disappointed
were
in you
bad.
if you didn't. Um, so I guess my question is that does the APL and the clubs, do they need to try this again, luring Matildas or big name international stars to Australia to try and drive crowd attendances and ratings? And I'm not suggesting the likes of a Sam Kerr. I'm not suggesting an Ellie Carpenter because there's
We
no
do
way
not
that
have
you
the money for that.
no, but like, could you get like a second tier Matilda star? And I don't mean second tier in terms of star power. I mean in terms of affordability, right? So the likes of a Hayley Razzo, who is currently without a club and has been at 5 clubs in the last, or 4 clubs in the last 5 years. The likes of I think Alana Kennedy is on a 1 year deal with Angel City, or is it a 2 year deal? Like, if MacArthur, if MacArthur ever get their, get it together and get their A League women team, like me, Alana Kennedy is a Campbelltownian. MacArthur FC's inaugural marquee signing, local girl Alana Kennedy, Matilda's star, get her in for a season or two. Like, to me, that is an absolute match made in heaven. Like, and that's what I mean when I say like the second tier is the affordability aspect. These would be affordable players. They People love Hayley Razzo. She might drive attendance up at Perry Park. I'm sure there'll be people lining up to get a Hayley Razzo Brisbane Roar jersey. You know, keeping Michelle Heyman in Canberra. And that's sort of what I mean here. Like, could we get that sort of like the next step down of Matilda's marquees, where they still hold a lot of name recognition that might drive people through the gate, but aren't going to come with the $2 million payday like a Sam Kerr?
I think Kennedy back for like MacArthur is a great shout. The likelihood of MacArthur ever getting it together, very low, unless the APL actually has like a, crackdown on them, being like, you can't run a team without a women's team, which is going to be a tough one to sell because Canberra United still exists and they're a women's team without a men's team. So there's something in that I could go for a rant on to do with like misogyny, but I won't do it. I won't.
We're already running over time.
I won't. No, I won't. I won't. I won't. I think the idea of the marquee player or marquees, like multiple, is a good idea, but considering what we have already mentioned about like half of these clubs running on a budget of like $4.50, and only having contracts that are 35 weeks long, and then you have other clubs that are in trouble for not having paid super, and then you have the ATO wanting to shut the doors on Brisbane, like literally the taxation office. I just I like it's a good idea in theory. In practice, I just don't think that's something any of them should be doing unless a like millionaire suddenly, and I don't mean like a 1 million millionaire, I mean like a 70 million millionaire decides to buy in, then that club can think about it. Uh, but under no financial circumstances should any club be considering that, except maybe Melbourne City, because I know they've got Big Oil FC. I know they've got some money, some spare change jangling around in someone's pocket somewhere in the Middle East. They could do it if they wanted to. Um, but yeah, these like the local clubs that don't have big spenders behind them, and even the clubs that do have the big spenders behind them, I just don't think it's the right move at this time because just don't really, it doesn't really work out. It definitely hasn't worked out in the men's game for a lot. I mean, we've had just the recent stuff with like Western. Western Sydney Wanderers. I was about to say Western United. No, they're in trouble for something else. Western Sydney Wanderers that have had issues with, the marquee signings there.
Yep.
It's different in the women's game because, we're not at a point in the game where it's, or where like certain leagues can be treated as like retirement leagues. Like that isn't the A-League women's. That isn't any of the women's clubs, which is kind of how the men's don't come for me if you're a men's fan. It's kind of how the men's team get their marquees. They get some player who's like, I'm kind of like, I'm over the hill, bored. Let me go to some nice country and play some football for a lot of money. That's kind of how I've seen it.
I mean, it was the MLS model for a number of years as well. That's how they got
Exactly.
David Beckham to the LA Galaxy.
Scheme.
Like, yeah,
Retirement scheme. And it works. But that's not where the women's game is at.
No.
We're not doing that yet. Maybe there will come a time. I hope. Low-key, I hope. There's a time in my life where we can be like, ugh, that women's league is a retirement league. That's where all the old players go to get money. Because that will mean we've made it. But yeah, I don't think the marquee is really going to be something feasible for the A-Leagues at this point in time, specifically the A-Leagues, the A-League women's.
Yep.
Unless they want to do Kennedy to MacArthur, because I think that would kind of slap. But
yeah,
that would,
and
again.
I think I fall on the same point of that discussion. I think we're both in agreement there that we're just not in a position to do it, regardless of the benefits it may or may not have.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lengthy discussion, but one I think we certainly needed to have, particularly as we're closer to the start of the off-season than we are towards the end of it. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening via your respective podcast feeds, remember to hit the subscribe button and, the little notification bell, as these episodes may become more frequent or less frequent throughout the off-season. So if you want to make sure that, you're across everything that we're doing over the next couple of months or so, that's the easiest way to be notified of when we're dropping episodes. But thank you very much for listening today, and goodbye.